Okay.
Well, welcome to our sixth show in the Uncertainty of series. The intent of this series is to expand client and reader minds to think about complexity and non-safety disciplines such as psychology, neuroscience, humanities, anthropology. In the order system of the real world, we are good at creating regulation standards, policies, compliance rules, and best practices. These constraints on human behavior produce if-then cause and effect relationships we can confidently rely upon. We also realize are times that are uncertainty, inconsistent, and unpredictable. And there's no guarantee if we do this, we will get that. We are in the complex system. It's messy and entangled. And today's show title is somewhat provocative: The Uncertainty of the Safety Professional, Stay or Leave. And last month we talked about the message some employers are giving employees: if they don't like it, then go elsewhere. And today we're going to discuss the employee's perspective: should I stay or should I leave? Which makes me think a little bit of the Clash song, "Should I Stay or Should I Go?" But
Yeah.
and I'm going to turn it over to Gary to introduce our guest today. And it's kind of fitting that we have Rosa today. I just had dinner last night, the night before, with Gary's previous partner in crime, Tamara Paris, and so it feels only right to have Rosa on right after Tamara and I met up and chatted about the continuation of the podcast. So I will turn it over to Gary.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Scott. And you said Rose has been on quite a few Safeopedia shows and webinars. First one where I somewhat got engaged was the Safety View. And that seemed to morph into Meet the Author, which we ran for a good 2 years before we morphed into what we have today, which is the Uncertainty Show. Well, Rose has been the author of a couple of safety books. The first one is The Relationship Factor in Safety Leadership. And that's where there it is in the back there. And that's when she focused on employee engagement. And she followed it up with her second book, Health and Safety Leadership Strategy. And there it is over there too. Right, is the size getting smaller and smaller? And that one's where she took a look at leaders, just not any leader, but authentically inclusive leaders to inspire employees. So now her third book, what she's got out, and if you can't see in the background there, I'm going to show you this picture, which is the book.
There you go.
And this is the basis for today's topic: OHS Voices from the Resistance. And when you talk a bit about uncertainty, I think, Rosa, you manage uncertainty because this is a self-published book. Kind of gone into the area of like, how do you publish books? Well, I think I'll do it myself. So congrats for that.
Thank you.
Well, let's start right off into it. And let me ask you the question: why did you write and publish OHS Voices?
Yeah, well, first of all, Gary, thanks for having me, because I appreciate the opportunity to explain further what I think the implications are of this book. During COVID, I was, a lot of people were available, so I did a lot of interviews during COVID, and I discovered that a lot of safety professionals were under tremendous pressures, and they felt, I'm being asked to do more and more, but I'm not getting any kind of recognition for the work I'm doing, and I just get more responsibility and I don't get much respect. So that was a big part of my second book, which was the Safety and Health Strategic Leader, where I proposed that the safety professional wasn't understood, and their role and their contribution in the organization was had to be recognized, because they were providing a tremendous amount of security and caring to the workers. During COVID, there was a survey that came out that said that the number one reason that people wanted to quit in their companies was because of the toxic environment. Okay. And then another study showed, well, you know, what follow up on that in terms of the toxic environment. And the lack was, I don't feel like I belong here.
Mm.
I just feel a sense of lack of belonging. Well, as it turns out, the safety professional, and not everyone, let me just say, because what I found was that about 53% or a little bit more of the safety professionals view themselves as part of the helping profession, which is very different than being focused only on risk and technology. In the helping profession, you actually the emphasis is on caring about people. And you notice in the book, I said that this was a marginalized group of people. They felt truly marginalized and misunderstood because they cared more about people than they did about statistics or hazards. Okay. So I did a follow-up book called the OHS Voices from the Resistance because I really wanted to explore why do people stay in the profession? Why do they leave? I did my own unofficial survey where 53% of the people said they were ready to leave their jobs. Interestingly enough, 70% said they would recommend the profession.
Mm.
How's that for a non sequitur?
Yeah, so this is not a mass exodus, so no big worries about that. But it is a lot of uncertainty in the area. So, and this is, of course, why we're here today. Let's talk about that uncertainty. You begin by writing there is an underground resistance taking place in the OHS ranks. And then you've kind of called together about 5 observations that struck you. So what were those 5?
One thing is that the safety professionals, I'm talking now about that branch because I do see the future of the safety profession dividing up into different fields. Okay, so if we're talking now because the helping profession, nurses, therapists, paramedics, those are all attract a certain kind of person that wants to help is different than a person who enjoys analysis and, you know, cutting up the facts and that sort of thing. So this particular group of people are focused on the frontline worker, and they are much closer than to the sharp end, and also feel that they are always more under threat than anybody else, because if something goes wrong, they could even be held legally responsible.
Mm.
Yeah, and they don't have power in the organization. They're considered outsiders by the operations people. Sometimes they're even just, blocking the way of progress, right? So they come up with ideas on how to improve safety, and sometimes people don't even respond. They don't even get responded to, which is really distressing. And they do get blamed when things go wrong. But why do people want to stay in the profession? Why did 70% of the people say you should stay? And it is because the profession is a place where if you are inclined to help people, this is a great opportunity and profession to do it in. So I think that if we were to provide opportunities for these people to get more recognition and to show their skills more, that our organizations would definitely benefit from it.
Yeah. You mentioned a bit about where the workers are. That made me think about this slide, which we introduced in previous shows. And this is the one that Todd Conklin presented several years ago. And of course, we call this the safety sphere. So if you were to look at this sphere, Rosa, where would you say this group, or as you call it, the tribe,
Yeah.
where are they located on the sphere?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, they're right at the sharp end because if anything goes wrong, then it immediately goes, the blame goes there in terms of safety and health.
Yeah, yeah, right.
And
Okay.
and they don't have power. I mean, all of the things that is true about the sharp end is true for the safety professional.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, right. So let's start with that why question, because as you know, Scott as well, we try to follow that the why, the what, and the how format, because again, this is an audience that we're talking to that are very interested in the practical side of things and how do I do something? So we want to get to there, and we will today as well. But let's start with the why question. Why is this resistance phenomenon in the OHS happening, Rosa?
All right. One of the reasons is that, and I got this from the people that I was interviewing, they felt that the number of women in the profession has been increasing. And traditionally, the feminine energy is about caring. And that's where the ethic of caring comes from. It was part of the feminist movement, that we're not recognized. Our kind of work isn't recognized in the organization. But yet, women, and that came out in my book about the COVID that covered COVID, was that women were the most stressed group and had the most responsibility during COVID, and that includes up to senior leaders. So the women coming into the profession are saying, well, well, it's all great and good that we're working with all this technology and all these numbers, but what about the people? So that's a big impact on them. Um, and the other reason is that I think David Proven, because he has been doing a lot of work in this area and he's very outspoken that the safety professional has been misled and dragged away from the original purpose of their work, which was to focus on the employee safety. Instead, many of them are doing administrative work and they're looking at how to make the OSHAs go away rather than looking at how to make the work safer. So it's a movement that is at this time I feel it is still a small movement, but it is growing as our society changes as well with a greater focus on people and the worker.
Yeah, yeah. And I think also I read in your book too, like, this isn't right now an attempt to overthrow corporate rule. So we're not seeing marches, we're not seeing protests, we're not seeing people carrying placards, but we are seeing these centers, again, underground, maybe undermining safety as usual, because maybe the work rules are not working. But helping those workers who are maybe having to bend the rules. And, bending the rules and knowing when to bend the rules has been a topic of previous shows as well. And they do that because they see a risk and they have to understand it and mitigate it. And the rules just don't cover that. Right? So this recurring theme is about really, we try to shift from behaviors that we're seeing to system conditions that influence why are people behaving this way? So we're still at the why's question. And what I did last show with John Trish Ross, we did introduce this sort of somewhat busy slide, and it's I call it the evolution of safety thinking diagram, to kind of make sense of an organization's systems and impacts on humans. So you're right. As you can say, perhaps the female eye is noticing that, hey, we've been treating people like cogs in a machine, or hazards, or heroes. Well, now we're going to go and talk a bit about humans as storytellers. And I think we can also explain why, using this diagram, why the OHS resistance emerges as unintended consequences if you treat people this way. So if you look along there, and let me know if you agree with me, Rosa. If we want to talk about those punishment and blame systems that are in there, well, that's because people are treated as cogs in a machine. And those mind-numbing numbers, well, that's that area on the second yellow bubble of change. And this is when business brought in things like business process reengineering, maybe introduced a bit of lean, but the whole focus was on meeting targets and numbers here. And
well, also interesting that that word human factors was not really about people. It was more about what, controlling people's behavior and what they were doing to ruin all of the safety systems that they had in place.
They're hazards, right? We
Yeah,
got to
people were hazards.
We got to constrain these hazards.
Yeah.
It's okay. So we're trying to move to that end of the cycle and talk about treating humans as storytellers, as opposed to remaining distant and objective and being underground. And I think this is what maybe you discovered. And when I read the stories, which were fascinating, you use some words like thick data. And for some people who haven't heard the term thick data, that comes from Tricia Wang, an ethnographer. I think everybody knows, again, from mind-numbing numbers and reality systems, what big data is all about. Most major companies have ERP systems, maybe the smaller, medium-sized Scott they're dealing with, they got a little smaller version of that, but there's some system that are running all the numbers, keeping the accountants happy, and keeping the production lines flowing. Trish came along and says, well, there's another type of data, thick data, which is really the stories. Because the big data was great for answering the who, the what, the when, those sort of questions, where the thick data answers the why question. Why are people behaving this way? We also found out too that stories can express emotions that the traditional fill in the form surveys cannot. And just on that note, I think we're all quite aware that survey fatigue has become a problem for researchers. Particularly when COVID, we're all sitting at home, we're doing stuff. I remember just getting inundated after survey, felt really good doing the first one or two or three, but when they started coming like 2 or 3 a day, you kind of go like, whoa.
You will be surveyed until you give the right answers.
Yes, maybe that's it. So let me ask you a question. What was the response like from these storytellers? Was it easy peasy, or is it like pulling teeth trying to get stories?
Well, no, it was very easy because people wanted to, they were dying to share their stories. They wanted to be, it was a chance to be heard, and to talk about some of the obstacles that we're facing. I would say almost everyone was just very positive about the work and what they were trying to do. The negatives were more about the treatment and the relationships in the organization. One thing I wanted to say about those surveys that I have found, and I was working on a very large safety culture assessment last year, and I read all of the comments on the survey, and then I discovered that nobody else on the team had read the comments. They only looked at the numbers. And I said, the comments is where all the information is to make sense of the numbers. And they said, oh, there's just too many of them. There's too many comments. I can't make heads or tails out of it. And I thought, there it is. It's a lack of understanding of the importance of the stories.
Yeah. Typically, when you do have what we call the Likert surveys, scored out of 10, out of 7, all the comments is typically where I start, because that's where you pick up the opinions. And what we know about opinions are formed because of experiences that you've had. And if we can get people to share those experiences, stories, that's much better than having a number 7 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 or 2 out of 10, which I have no idea what to do with that. If you talk about safety improvements and we say we want to move the needle from a 3 to a 4, what the heck does that mean? So we need to go, and the term we use is granularity. We need to go down a bit lower and kind of see, here's some really, really good stories. Let's do more of those. Here's some really, really bad experiences shared as stories. Let's do less of these. So from that, people go like, oh, this is how we can change. Fewer of these, more of these.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I think it's so interesting because it's like having conversations in an organization is like pulling teeth because managers do not have time for conversation. If I bring that up as something for them to do as a follow-up, why don't you just gather this group of people and ask them what the survey comments mean?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times you can misinterpret the comments because you don't work side by side with that person, or you have a different level. Certainly the middle management and upper management have no idea what's going on at the sharp end of the spear.
Yeah.
They need to have conversations with their cultural translators,
Yeah.
And again, safety professionals serve that function as well because they are out there. They see what the workers are talking about, and they can come in and say, here's what I think this story means. But deeper than that is that reading the comments is taking a very personalized view of the organization, that you have to care. You have to care that this person took the time to write this comment and express their frustration, or sometimes they say good things about their boss. They'll say, this is one of the best leaders I've worked for. It isn't all negative, but too many times people pour out their hearts, and at the end they'll say, maybe this time somebody will listen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about socio-psychological emotions, feelings, and that is something that is not covered or talked about with management programs or in safety. The people that are doing it in safety come by it because of their personalities. But we have to find a way, how do we get that package so that we can teach it as part of the curriculum, and more people can begin to start thinking about the workforce as as people. How can we work better with people? How can we communicate better with people instead of always thinking about it from an organizational and systems level?
Yeah. You've got one quote there from, I think it's Korvelik, 1997, which I thought was so apropos, where you said that stories are the essence of culture and the only way to measure it. And I 100% agree with it. And that's why we're looking at humans as storytellers, because if we're going to make safety culture improvement, let's not look at 6.2 or 8.7 and all those sort of things. Let's look at what are the stories that are everyday stories that people are telling each other. I think that's where you can really find out what the culture is about.
Okay, but why do we avoid it? When I say we, I'm talking about the safety professionals I was working with that said they couldn't read the comments because it was just too confusing. And I know that the most of the managers, I mean, you hand them your report, right? How many do you think read the report? They'll read the executive summary if you're lucky. Why? Why, Gary? Why do you think that is?
I think one thing, and I picked this up on your previous book, in your leadership book, when I read that, I'm going like, okay, if you have the manager says here, I'm going to spend my time going out talking to the forces. In other words, looking in and trying to talk to every person in my organization, you can do that, but you're not going to be a very effective CEO. It's like, because who's looking out if you're looking in?
Right.
We need you to look out, but how do you inform yourself what the folks are doing inside? Very, very difficult, as you well explained it, trying to look at individual stories. So we have to move up. And as we discovered in anthropology, stories form patterns. So what we've done, the work that we've done, is say, can we actually create a visual map showing, revealing the patterns that stories are formed? In many cases, we as researchers, we try to do that. You read, from the 59 people you talk to, and your mind is going, because the mind really recognizes patterns. And it's looking at, oh, this is kind of like bubbling to the top. And that's probably where your 5 observations came from, right? But we all know too that as individuals, we all have cognitive biases. We all have different slants. So how do we avoid that? So we capture the authentic voice of the storyteller. And now we do have ways, and this is probably a subject for another show, Scott, but we can show these patterns objectively as possible, so that you and I can be with the C-suite and say, okay, look how the patterns are formed. And if you want to look down at the individual stories for context, we can do that. But you need to stay focused at the pattern level, higher up level, so you can make sense of what's happening in your organization. So that's how I think.
That's a good way to explain it to the higher levels, because that fits within their self-image of their role, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm talking about at the sharp end of the stick. Why don't supervisors have more conversations? Why don't most safety professionals not have more conversations?
Yeah.
In my experience, it's fear.
Yeah.
Fear keeps them from doing it. And what is the biggest fear? I think it's fear of failure. If I go and I have a heart-to-heart talk with you, Gary, and you tell me, what am I going to do if I can't do anything about it? What, I'm just going to walk away and look like a failure. And that is not the case. That is not the case. Because what I would like people to understand is that when you go and you have a real conversation with another human being, that listening to them and seeing them, listening empathetically and seeing them is a gift. That is a gift. So the person then, you can discuss whatever it is. I had one safety guy tell me, well, they all want these $1,000 ergonomic chairs. So I'm not even going to go out and ask them what they need. And I said, what would happen if you had a conversation and said, look, that's completely out of the budget. Let's look at some alternatives. And then you got them involved in looking at the alternatives. How would that work? But nobody teaches that way of give and take, how to handle those kinds of situations. And yet we go into a profession where we're going to be faced with that constantly and not know how to deal with it. Even as a supervisor, the same thing.
Yeah. My follow-on story to that, we want $1,000 ergonomic chairs, no, you're not going to get it. Happened when I was collecting stories, and one of the electricians I was talking says, management always thinks that we have an unlimited safety budget in this company. And the answer is, we're not crazy. We're also moms, we're dads, we have kids. And one of our kids says there, I want $1,000 phone. Are we going to say, sure? No. How do you manage that relationship at home? it's not like saying, no, you can't have it. But it may be like, so what are alternatives to $1,000 phone? Is there another way we can do this? Would you like to earn your way towards it? But you're right. It's actually the starting point for a conversation, not the ending point and say, no, you can't have it.
Yeah.
And that's where we get this engagement I think you want to get going here. So I'm just watching the clock here. Now that we kind of have an understanding why the resistance is occurring, you're right. So what can we do about it? If we say why, but we don't know anything about it here, we're not being very helpful here. So you've come up with 6 recommendations from your research and findings. And can you just quickly share? We don't have to spend a lot of time on the Rosa because we're going to go into the how part and talk about each one individually. But just as an overview, can you just quickly share what those 6 are?
People are willing to talk and they're willing to share, and they do value that. If you listen, take notes, and even if you can only find one thing that you could help them with or deliver, you're going to gain a tremendous amount of trust and confidence with the people that you're working with. But in order to do that, you have to be willing to go out and take that risk. It is a risk because some safety professionals have experienced rejection to the point. I mean, I remember the one story where they were being spit on. I mean, that's very traumatic, and that's certainly going to get you to the point where you don't really want to go out and talk to anyone, right? But it has a lot to do with if you're willing to take the risk to go out and to meet with people and to start listening, you will begin to see a change in your relationships. And that's really, if you read my book on the relationship factor and safety performance, those are all leaders that were willing to listen. The manager that was willing to go to the night shifts and gather information from them. That was the first time anybody had ever done that. The GM who had all of his direct reports, he told them never pass by anyone without looking at them in the eye and saying hello and learn their names. Look at them in the eye, say hello, learn their names, good morning, whatever. And that, he felt, was what began to change the culture from low morale, and it began to lift people up so that they became willing to participate. Because don't forget, don't go in with a negative mindset. Remember that these people have been through a lot. You don't know what they've been through until you ask them. So don't jump to conclusions that these are negative people. Go in assuming that they're positive people. And I think, I know you've asked me to think about a story in my book that I felt really demonstrated this process. So I'll just jump right into that. Is that okay, Gary?
Yeah, go ahead, sure. Yeah.
Okay. And that is Stephanie Neary, who has, by the way, I mean, she's gone on to become the head of one of the WISE chapters. WISE, W-I-S-E, is Women in Safety Excellence, part of the ASSP. And she has an amazing, it's huge group and very, very active. They always get the highest accolades at the ASSP. And she started out as a timid, new, young safety professional who was afraid, who felt she wasn't ever listened to. That all the guys, she worked in the shipyards, and the guys were real burly guys, real male macho mans. And she said that she decided to try what I had recommended, which was to go out. And she said, do you mind if I work beside you for a few hours so I can learn more of what you do? And to her surprise, they said, no, go ahead. And they were making fun of her because she's trying to do things where she didn't have, she didn't know how to do it, and they had to teach her how to do it. And that transformed her relationship with the workers. They started looking for her and saying, oh, you know, Stephanie, this needs to be fixed, or I think I have this great idea, which they never used to do until she reached out, and she became the one who didn't know, which she didn't. She was being truthful. She didn't know anything. And one of the biggest problems with our brand new graduates, because they share with me, I thought people were going to listen to me because I understood the regulations and I knew what to do. They're very disappointed because that isn't what gets people to listen to you. The reason people listen to you is because they trust you.
So I'm just looking at your 6 recommendations that you wrote in the book.
Mm-hmm.
One of them was looking at trying to raise awareness of social psychological influences, basically mental health. Then you suggested that maybe we need to update the definition of OHS because it seems to be all over the map in terms of regulatory. We also then, in conjunction, maybe update the OHS curriculum. And you talked a bit about that to meet organizational needs, which aren't being done.
Yeah.
And we also, you talked a fair bit in the book, which I thought was interesting, about aligning the practitioner's identity, vocation, and role. And that got me to do a lot of thinking. Then you talk about what can we do internally, just improving our own internal relationships with cross-group communication and collaboration. And the last one is probably connection to your previous book. How do we help organization leaders become better employers? So what we did, Scott, we took the 6 recommendations, and I suggested that we now need to figure out how are we going to implement these things. So now we're moving into the how phase. And in order to implement these things, we need some sort of a map. I think you guys know me well enough. I love maps. So I'm going to introduce another map to you. It looks a little bit busier, let's see, but it looks like this. And hopefully you can read that. You can read that. This is what we call an affordance map. Now, anybody that's been involved in safety by design is probably familiar with the term affordance because it's used when you design controls to prevent physical accidents. I like what Rob Long said, and Rob, I know he mentored you were writing this book, Rosa. He says in psychology, affordance is a spatial representation of what the environment offers the individual. So he defines affordance as the way context, objects, and social presence afford a response. So for an example, for an object in the environment, could be a chair. So what does a chair afford? Well, it affords sitting, standing on, blocking a door, even throwing, and I guess if you're in a jungle, maybe warding off some lion or so. So that's what a chair affords you, some sort of
not that we recommend standing on it.
No, that's right. Exactly. Right. We're gonna have to talk about Rob about that. And social presence, what does that afford? Well, that's our formal policies and standards that permit or constrain, but it also includes informal taboos and sacred cows. Well, that's what environment affords. So in a change intervention design, and really what this uncertainty show is all about is how do we improve safety or make safety improvements? Affordance refers to possible actions that can be readily perceived. And for today, we're going to use your 6 recommendations. So let me just explain how this simple map works. It's very straightforward, 2-dimensional XY grid. On the y-axis, you've got human energy cost to change. And it can range from low to high, depending on the current resistance, the resources, number of people involved, and so on. The x-axis is the time potentially required to implement a change. And it could be short to long term. 6 months, 1 year, or 3 years. Essentially what this map tells you, it tells you where you are in the present.
Mhm.
So when we use these sort of maps, it's getting together with the group in a workshop, and let's define what the Y and X axes are, what low and high, short and long mean, so you can develop some. Everything here is relative. So no really mind-numbing numbers involved. Everything is just relative. It tells you where you are in the present. It also identifies where change is extremely difficult. So if you look at the top right, high energy, where energy cost in a long time is really, really high, those are things that are going to be really, really difficult to change.
Mhm.
An analogy may be in your environment, if you've got a mountain in front of you, you ain't going to move the mountain even if you want to. It's there. You could, but it's going to take a lot of energy, a long time. It also helps understand where change is volatile and can happen suddenly. That's the bottom left corner. So these are things that you can't control. So all you can do is just monitor them very closely. And with this very simple map, all that we need to understand is that if we're going to make safety improvement changes, they're most viable and navigable in that middle between those dotted lines. So what Rosa and I did as a bit of a fun and to simulate how a workshop exercise would be done by our viewers, we just took each of those 6 hexes and I added one called leave, resign, and quit in the bottom left. Where would they be positioned on this particular map? And you can quickly understand too that depending on the group that you're with and the conversations you're having, these hexes could be placed on different spots on the map. And these are all of the experiences, perceptions, opinions that people bring with them, right? And so to set a bit of a context for this exercise, we said, well, let's think about a medium-sized manufacturing organization, and we have safety professions, and they're regionally decentralized. So just give us a bit of a context setting. So what would happen is that there would be conversations held with groups regarding actions to improve. And these are the 6 that they came up with. What happens to be Rosa's 6 here. And what they do is that they assess the affordance and they agree on a map position for the context of the organization here. There's a bit of a detail we go into is that we're not looking for people just to compromise, but to really, really agree this is where it goes. And that may take some really deep conversations as well. We can talk about later here. Okay. Now, like I said, I put one down in the bottom left, leave, quit, resign. Why here? Because it's an individual's decision to stay or leave or attempt to change one's role. And really, if this is management during this map, you have no control over this decision. So let's start with the first one. And let me do this. I think I can do this with my hand. Yeah, I can do that. And we looked at one called the mental health of OHS practitioners, which is right here. That's showing up there. Okay. So Rosa, can you let's you and I have a conversation as why we thought this is here. What were the systemic conditions that lead to us placing it here? Okay.
I was just going to say quickly as well that we can share this with anyone afterwards as well, so they can walk through it as well, right, Gary?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, right. And if we get a lot of feedback, like, wow, like affordance mapping is pretty cool, we may decide, let's do a whole separate show on that. And maybe even we could do a real live one with breakout teams.
Yeah,
Try that out and come back, right? So this is all about learning, and in some cases, Rosa, sustaining all the great work that you've done in your book. How can we do that?
I just got another thought too, because Corey and I have talked about how we need to change the curriculum and for the OHS profession. And perhaps we could get a group of people who are interested, maybe Dave Provan and Corey, and I don't know who else comes to mind, to do this, because I don't know if they would agree, but I found that the mental health awareness was the first step, because so many people were thinking of quitting, and talked about the stress that they were under,
Mhm.
and or even some people committing suicide as a result of this. So that seemed to be the most urgent human need to address.
Yeah.
And
but
that's also something that you could do individually. If you said, you know what, I'm going to start taking better care of my mental health, you could do that individually.
yeah. And also positioning it here shows that it doesn't take a huge amount of energy to make a change.
Right.
And the time to change probably isn't that long because there's probably not a lot of people involved. So
Well,
the time is short
let
can
me
be changed.
correct you there for a moment, Gary. When, you know, an individual could decide, I'm going to take responsibility for my mental health. But as you know, psychologically, if you're depressed, you're not in any condition to take responsibility for your own mental health. And that's when you need professional help. But in an organization, it's a huge cultural change to start being concerned about mental health and awareness.
Yeah. So in this kind of assimilation workshop, this organization, we placed it here. Now, if you did have an organization where it's a big thing, we would move that not here, but
Right.
way over here. Right?
Yeah.
And what that does, it says, this is a map, if you like, for the C-suite. It's a management saying, here's our issues, recommendations, look where they are. So
Yeah.
the idea is that you want to do the ones, if you want to use the term low-hanging fruit, we can do that. But we think we can get through this one or get a good start on it. It's here. Now, we may discover that, oops, our assessment was wrong and it's way over here. Then that just changes the map and the affordance. We were wrong about the affordance. Okay. So let's move on to this next one, where we looked at the definition of OHS and regulatory educational professional associations. We stuck it way over there, almost like in the area, like, are you really going to try to make that change? Long time, a lot of energy. So let's just have a chat about that. Why did we stick it there? Again, this is just our opinion on this exercise.
Sure, because you're fighting 100 years of tradition there in terms of what's the identity of a safety professional, which it's been through many evolutions. And right now there's a real split. You have your safety differently people, you have your traditional safety, you have your risk management, you have SPOR. So you have some very big gaps, lack of agreement on what is an OHS professional.
Yeah. And in this organization, you could be the an OHS professional. You've submitted a request that you want to join a certain board, volunteer board, and do I have the permission to leave and go and make some of these changes? And who knows? We said here, no, sorry, we need you to stay on the job at work here. You cannot go and join those organizations. If you get that, then you can see why it would be up here for this particular person here. On the other hand, if you did have somebody that was elected to be a board member with a bit of influence now, that could actually shift down here, perhaps. So you can see is you can take different affordance maps and you can start comparing them, and you can see how come it's easier for you, not for me. What are your conditions that are holding you back or enabling you to go further? Again, having these really healthy conversations about where we can make change. The third one you talked about is updating the OHS curriculum to meet organizational needs. It's here.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, and I put it kind of attached to identity, vocation, role alignment, because the curriculum sets people up for what to expect and gives them the skills. So you have to know what, it's interesting what we focus on now, because I've attended a couple of classes and they talk a lot about what, how to record the OSHA recordables, and when is it last time, when is it not? And then I come in for 1 hour out of their entire curriculum and talk about culture. The rest of the time is legal stuff.
Yeah, yeah. There's also a tie here, Scott, when we had our own show between you and me, where we talked about chefs and recipe followers.
Mm-hmm.
Is if any of you are following the work that's done by Dr. Robert Long, he has recommended some additions to this OHS curriculum here. Now, it may be worthwhile, we need to go look a little bit further there to see, are there some things that we can just buy off the shelf as a recipe follower and just insert that in our current curriculum? Or are we really starting from scratch for ourselves? Yes, the other issue that we had about that, and why we did have it a long time, is in our medium-sized manufacturing organization, we're finding out that, the current focus is on trades and leadership training. If you're an OHS professional, we don't have anything for you. You got to go that externally. And then you also have to get approval from management to go on an external course. So again, it's all about affordance. And I think I read one story in here where somebody did make a request for something and was turned down. I mean, that would mean like, okay, easy energy, but no, the affordance is really quite over there. It's going to take a long time, and that may require changing in management's thinking, their behaviors, whatever. And we don't know what is causing them to behave that way in the system. Is it profit issues? Is it other issues? External, political, technical? Don't really know. Okay. Now, the fourth one is this one about practitioners' identity, vocation, as well as roles. And that is right here. And we did purposely connect the two hexes together because there is obviously some connection. And can you explain why we did that, Rosa?
Well, as I said earlier, you have to, the curriculum should prepare people for the role
Mhm.
and what they are expected to do, which it doesn't do right now, other than that, it just looks at some of the legal matters and hazard identification, the usual things, control, hazard identification. But there's nothing there about, how do you have a conversation with someone? What happens if you're getting rejected? What happens if nobody's listening to you? Those are all things that you would study if you were trying to become a social worker, for instance, or a teacher. We're taught what to do, in order to gain the confidence and trust
Yeah,
of people that we're teaching.
yeah,
But that's missing from the OHS curriculum.
yeah. There was an interesting comment somebody made about the term peripheral expert.
Yeah, peripheral expert. Yeah.
Can you explain that to the
Yeah,
game?
and that's aligned with internal working relationships. A peripheral expert is someone who is not part of the core business. So you as a consultant would automatically be a peripheral expert, right? But there are others. In my book, I talk about a study that was conducted in mental health in the Army, where they brought in mental health experts who were actually part of the unit, but they were never accepted as partners or equals. They were treated like peripheral experts, which means we'll take your advice when it suits us, because we feel that you're just always trying to get in the way of the real work that we're trying to do here in the Army. So that is very much, it felt to me like a safety professional would be considered a peripheral expert because they never feel like they are part of the management team.
Yeah. Okay. The fifth one you had was about improving internal working relationships, and we've already talked a lot a bit about that, having these cross-group communications between each other. Heck, even developing an affordance map together, which kind of falls under this hexad here as well.
Yeah.
This is an opportunity for the OHS practitioners to feel more like they're being seen and they're being heard as well. And the very last one is over here, and it's about helping leaders become employers. This is an interesting.
Could I go back to the internal
sure.
relationships for a moment? Because
Okay,
that's the
yeah,
story
okay.
I told about Stephanie Neary. She went about developing her internal relationships.
Ah, right.
Okay, so then you're doing that with the people that you're working with. And then you should also look at your supervisors and managers and develop those relationships.
Yeah.
Helpful to them.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, good. This area here is very interesting on the affordance map. And let me explain that. It's just below the dotted line. And what that means, it's not like solid, like I cannot change, but it's something that could change, but it probably requires a paradigm shift or something. What we find often, and when we do these maps, if we have hexes along here, and management looks at that, they'll go like, management will go like, oh, you assume that I said you can't do this. Sure, you can go ahead and do that, and boom. All of a sudden, it's one of those things where, as management says, why am I always the last person to find out about these things? So this is a great, and we put these up here again to make them visible for management to see, like, oh my God, I didn't realize that I was being a constraint on the system, or I wasn't affording them. They were assuming I wasn't affording them. I didn't even think about it or even know about it. So it just changes the conversation. Like, oh, we can do this? Sure, go ahead. And then all of a sudden, like very quickly, bing, we can start making some safe improvements here. Okay. So let's leave that as is. Just watching the time. I do want to take a little bit deeper dive into the leave option, okay? Because we did say stay or leave.
Yeah.
If you're going to leave, can you talk us about that? Take us through, like, what did you know about leaving? What did you hear from the people you spoke to?
Well, there were several people who are successful OHS professionals. They're able to initiate projects, things that other professionals felt, no, my hands are completely tied. I don't have any influence, right? And so the people without any influence fell into, I'm kind of stuck here because I need the paycheck, to I'm looking for somewhere else to work. I can't wait to get out of here. And then the people who were successful, because remember, 70% said they would recommend the job, right?
Yeah.
People who were successful said you can be successful here as long as you're not expecting recognition and approval. And I thought that was pretty telling right there. So you have to be a self-actualized person to be successful, which is a lot to ask of people, especially young people. I mean, when you come in as a young person, you're not very likely to be self-actualized, right? How much talent are we losing right up at the front door?
Yeah. And did we learn anything from during COVID? We heard about this great resignation.
Yeah,
Because
then
people
but
realize that they don't
people,
have to stay in a toxic situation.
right, people were felt empowered to leave. So more people are considering it. Yes.
Yeah. So I think,
Exactly.
yeah. So I think the question of uncertainty is, when do I leave? How do I know if it's the right time to leave, resign, or quit? And I think what we're suggesting in terms of a how-to is you need to look at your system conditions that are influencing you. And some of the toxic ones that we have just picked out, and there's a lot of studies for that. I think Kalila had a great observation. What she had, where here she was in EH&S department, responsible for lean objectives, and she wasn't even involved in it. But that showed up on her, on her annual performance review, her bonus pay. So again, that's a toxic system condition. And that's what I think we were trying to look at. I think you wanted to talk a bit about cognitive dissonance as well, right?
Well, it's just cognitive dissonance is what happens when what's going on around you doesn't match reality in your head. And so if you come in as a safety professional and you are expecting to help people, and then you get placed in a position where you end up just, manipulating numbers, you're suffering from cognitive dissonance because I'm here to help people, but I'm not being allowed to do that. I'm being told to do something else. And that's a very negative psychological state to be in because that leads to burnout, depression. So in terms of as an individual, I think we're having more and more open conversation about that you need to really be planning your career and looking at opportunities all of the time because that way you have options. If you feel it's not working out in a company because you're not fulfilling your purpose, because that's another thing. The younger generation, they want a job where they're fulfilling a purpose. Yeah, and safety can be a great one for that if you're in the right company.
Yeah. So again, it's a good time opportunity to examine all of your systems in your organization, be it performance measurement, be it your legal system. I know some people stay awake at night because of their legal responsibilities, even your health and welfare system. I mean, does the system enable you to burn out but provides those systems to get you back on track? You're all looking at these different things here. So what we're also saying too is that in our simple exercise, we did it looking at the organization with a group of people. You as an individual, you can also create your own affordance map. And so what we call, technical term, the lowest level of coherent granularity, there I said it, got it out, is having meaningful conversations with yourself, okay?
Yeah.
Identifying the conditions that meet your own practical, social, and professional needs. And I think the ones that I picked up from your book was employee recognitions, fulfilling work, genuine care and interest in protecting health and safety. I would suggest there's a couple more from past shows, fairness and justice as well.
Yeah.
Now you can take that and use that and then create your own map, look at the issues that you've got and plot them on your map. And if you've got a lot located near the top right, I think you may want to think about, oh, should I be leaving the organization? And what you want to do is that just keep your affordance map refreshed with newly arrived or previously hidden information that's now revealed. So do that as a good exercise. Then you will pay attention to what we call weak signals, that maybe there are new opportunities emerging. So that idea, what you talked about, is that you can leave, and there's a positive way to leave. It's because there's an opportunity that's risen that you can do. You can meet all your sort of all your needs in a better way. And again, another good complexity term is you can also look at what for we call the adjacent possibles. And those are things that forward show up, and these are little small steps that you can take. We're not taking about major, huge steps on Fortis map. It's these small little steps that you take that may open up into bigger steps here. Okay? And that's how we navigate in the complex domain. Now,
It's important to mention that this is one way to manage the situation from a
Yes.
system perspective.
Yeah.
Not many people connect with that, because what happens in the workplace is your gut does all the decision making. How did they make, how do I feel today, and who didn't listen or who did listen. And so my concern would be that people would jump into quitting or leaving too soon, because they haven't really considered, is there something I need to change about myself?
Yeah. And you may very well find that the need is there in the company,
Right.
and maybe it's a small shift there to get what you want. So you
Right.
never have to leave the organization, but you can find it in the spaces between the two dotted lines.
Yeah, I mean, you could still leave because you want to try something new, but you'll leave as a successful person.
Yeah, so there's different definitions of leaving.
Yeah.
Physically leaving the organization and going somewhere different, or else moving from job to job. Or nowadays, we don't even talk about jobs. It's more about changing roles and identities. Right? And maybe you, as part of your Fortis map, you even invent a new title or a new role, because you see
go.
you have to be fulfilled. So let's not get stuck
idea.
with jobs and job titles on that one there as well. Okay. So I think we may have even just gone a bit past the
I think
hour.
we did. But we had a good time.
So I'm going to leave Rosa with you. If you've got, do you have 3 takeaways from this great conversation we've had?
Oh, gosh. All right. First of all, you need to have a consistent practice for yourself to take care of your mental health, whether it's exercise, mindfulness, meditation. You need to make that a priority. And I have yet to meet very many people that do that on a regular basis, but I think that's absolutely necessary. Also, there's no shame in leaving a job. There's no shame. You don't have to feel bad about it. And you may be able to leave on a positive note, or you may not be able to leave on a positive note. But the thing is that you have to take the action that is going to be good for you and your family. Yeah. And the the future is very, very uncertain. You can't really control it.
No.
So I think that's important, because no matter where you go, you're probably going to encounter a lot of the same challenges.
Yeah.
So do your self-assessment. Is this something in myself that I can improve? Or is this something that is just simply not going to change in this organization? And I've had to do that over and over, even with my clients. Am I going to be able to work with this client and understand what they need, or am I the wrong person to help them?
Yeah. I think one of the things I've learned too, working with uncertainty or complexity, is letting go of this idea that we're always moving forward in one direction. Not necessarily. As we talked about in last month's show, it could be moving from different safety ages depending on the current situation. When COVID hit us, we all kind of hunkered down, and now we're back up this way. So 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards is okay. 1 step backwards to make 2 steps forward is also possible as well. This is the adjacent possible. You take that small step, look around, then where does the next step show up, right? That's really what it is.
I wanted to also say this book has a lot of tips as to how to think about your job, how to develop yourself. Self-awareness is going to be the number one thing that employers look for in the future, self-awareness. So the book really emphasizes that.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I think we're done, Scott, so we're going to turn it back over to you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Gary and Rosa. And it's always an interesting conversation with Rosa. I know the one that you had with Corey was very insightful, and with Gary as well. So lots to think about. And I think I say this every time we have Rosa, is that we need to follow up and have her back and dig in a little bit deeper, because I do think there's a lot there, the map, that exercise, the self-awareness, and just the different opportunities available to safety professionals as well. So definitely insightful and inspiring, and definitely need more follow-up. So thanks so much for joining today. We'll mention as well, we'll put in the description maybe links to the diagram. We'll talk, see if we can maybe have a workshop like Gary recommended about how to maybe walk through that. And we'll include a link to the Safepedia community, where we really want to support safety professionals. And if you are struggling, if you are faced with some uncertainty, click that link, join the community, and connect with your peers who've maybe been through that and can provide some advice and insight and help you through this time. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.